Hello, students. This is Mr. Pitts. I'm going to be lecturing you over the life of Christ, Luke chapter 7 and 8 today. I know in the email I said we were going to only focus on chapter 8, but I wouldn't be giving you any justice if I didn't share with you the events of chapter 7, which lead into chapter 8 as we'll be discussing the parable of the seed. One of the big questions we'll be asking ourselves during these two chapters is, where is our faith? As we talked about last chapter, chapter 6, and understanding what it means to follow Christ and everything, which we will have a little recap on that in these notes. These next two chapters helps us understand the idea of faith, and what Christ is trying to show his disciples is that where is your faith? Is your faith in me, or is your faith in yourself or in the situation? And so I think he wants us to learn the same thing. And so the goal for these notes are to kind of cover over those two chapters. And yes, if you have any questions, I will have my email open. I may even do a chat room. I'll send you a link for that if that is going to happen. But either way, if you want to talk about these things further, you can contact me through email, or we may do an actual Flipgrid chat to talk about these particular things. Let's go. All right, first the objectives we're going to explore the idea of rejection as it deals with the ministry of Christ, as he would go to those who were rejected. We're going to read Luke 7 situations in light of the Sermon on the Plain from Luke 6, and then lastly, we are going to look at understand that Jesus' ministry was not just to the Jews but also to the Gentiles, as he goes to the centurion, which is, we'll talk about what that is and who that is, and the woman from Nain. We'll talk about that too. All right, so the title of this particular section is Life of Christ, Christ's Ministry to the Reject. By the way, for those who are taking notes or writing this down, this is still Unit 4. We will be in Unit 4 until Chapter 9, so just label your notes in one note as Unit 4. Okay, so as I said, we're going to kind of recap on the Sermon on the Plain, and what Jesus was trying to tell us in that particular sermon as he was explaining the following. So just a recap of the last chapter. He said, "Blessed are the hungry, poor, sad, and those who are talked negatively about." So those who are hated. He said those are the individuals who are blessed. And if you're going to follow him, you have to be with that sort of mindset. Not physically hungry, not material-wise poor. He's not saying he wants everybody to always be sad, but he's saying that he wants you to be 100% dependent on him. If we were to sum all four of those things in one word, he wants you to be humble and humble in him. And that what it means to be a disciple is to be humble. He went on to say those who are blessed, or those who are humble, will be able to love their enemies. So even those who rejected you. So that's the idea. If you're going to follow me as a follower of Christ, you must be humble, and you must love not just those who like you, but those who hate you, as I have loved those who hate me. That's what he's saying. Then he goes on, he says, "Blessed are the ones who produce good fruit, so those who produce life." If you follow me, you will produce life. Everything that you do, your integrity will reflect everything that is me. So basically, you will be walking. If you're going to walk with me, you need to reflect who I am, and that is a God of love. And then lastly, blessed is the one who builds their house on the rock. Those who build and pretty much allow themselves to be their whole lives to be built on Jesus and His Word. And so this is what it means to be a disciple. And Jesus is letting all his disciples who are following him know that, hey, this is the requirements. Like I said a couple weeks ago, this is kind of like, hey, if you're going to do this the right way, if you're going to do this and you're going to live with me and live this life of Christ, these are the job requirements right here. You don't have to choose it. It's your choice. But if you choose me, this is what's going. This is what it entails to be a follower of Christ. And so, as we end chapter 6, we get to chapter 7. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read these with you, and please follow along. We'll be in the ESV. We'll first be in Luke chapter 7, verse 2 through 10. And I'm getting there right now. Luke chapter 7, verses 2 through 10. Now, honestly, I could just read verse 1. It's no big deal. This kind of gives us a kind of a background of where we are. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So I'll start at verse 1 instead. But it says, after he had finished all his sayings and hearings of the people, he entered Capernaum. So that's where he is now. He's in Capernaum. Now a centurion who had a servant was sick at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent him to the elders of the Jews, asking him to come and deal with his servants. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. And Jesus went with them, and when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume you to come, but say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes, and to the other, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard these things, he was marveled, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the home, they found the servant well. All right, so we have the centurion man. The centurion is a Roman soldier who is in charge of 100 men. Century comes from the centurion. Century is the word term 100. That's what we get century from, 100 years. But he's in charge of 100 men. So this man is he's not Jewish. He's actually a Roman soldier. And as you read, he sends a servant to go to Jesus to ask him to heal his other servant. And the servant reports that this man's a good man. He helped the Jews build their synagogue. And Jesus is like, okay, well, let's go. And so let's talk about the centurion man. Here we go. So first off, centurion was a man. Like I told you, he was a Gentile, so he's Roman. He's in the ruling class of society that had power. And so there we go. He's from Capernaum, so that's where he's from. What moved Jesus was basically his faith. Now, this is interesting, because as the scripture said, as they were on their way to meet this man, Jesus meet this man, so Jesus could heal this man. Another servant of the centurion runs up and says, please do not come to my house. He says, I'm not even worthy for you to step into my house, but I know if you just speak and say that my servant is healed, he'll be healed. He'll be healed. And Jesus is thrown back by this and sort of is marveled. The term marveled is just it means amazed. He's amazed by the fact that this man's faith is that strong that he knew that if all he had to do was just speak it would happen. And he looks back at the other Jews and he says, do y'all hear this? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course. He didn't say y'all, but he says, do you hear this? This man has not one person in all of Israel has more faith than this man. Now, I'm not gonna lie. To a Jew, to say that to a whole group of Jews who are God's people, that this Roman centurion has more faith than them, that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, that's sort of a put down to the Jew, honestly. And it's amazing that he would say that, but it's put down to the Jew. But it's kind of putting him in check, like, hey, disciples, you've been walking with me for this long, and you don't even have that much faith. I mean, you've been with me. You've seen it. You don't have as much faith. I've done this, and this. You still don't have that much faith. And he's like, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. So anyway, that's the man. So Jesus says the word and heals this man's servant. It says heals a slave on the notes, but it's his servant. Heals his servant just by speaking it because of the man's faith. That's why he did it. Okay, now let's go to the woman. Jesus raises a widow's son. Now, a couple of background. As you know, widows were not looked highly at this time because of the whole sort of, taboo when it comes to a widow or orphan. And remember I told you all that in the Jewish culture, and even in the ancient Near East culture, if anybody was a widow or had some sort of disease or an orphan, they were considered to be cursed. God hated them. God was upset with them, and that's why they lost their husband. That's why they lost their parents. That's why they are sick or diseased or crippled. So they must be cursed. Those who are blessed are the ones who have everything. Those who are cursed are the ones who have lost something or don't. That was that mentality back then. It was circumstantial, basically, circumstantial faith. If I have something, if I have a lot, then I'm blessed. If I don't have this, or if I lost this to sickness or death, then I am cursed. So Luke introduces to this widow woman who's in Capernaum, and she's lost her son. And so what we know about that already is that as a woman, you cannot work, and usually the next of kin would help you, hopefully a male. So now we meet this widow woman. She's already lost her husband. Now she loses her son. So that means she has a death sentence in a way. So let's read real quick. So Luke 7:11 through 17. And it says the following. Soon after, he went to a town named Nain, and his disciples, a great crowd, went with him. As he drew near to the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, and the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he was compassionate on her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came up and touched the bear, and the bear stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, rise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, "A prophet has risen among us, and God has visited his people." And this report about him spread through the whole Judea and all the surrounding country. So that's Luke 7:11 through 17. So let's get some background on the lady. So the woman here is a widow woman, like I said. Of course, she's a woman. She's Jewish. She's at the bottom of society. So if you were to compare her to the centurion, she's at the bottom of society, and she's powerless. So again, she's a woman. She's Jewish. She's at the bottom of society, one of the low, because she's a widow, and she's powerless. She's from Nain, so she lives in that particular area, which that's where she is. But what moved Jesus to heal her? Well, it was Jesus' compassion that moved. It was his compassion. He saw this woman weeping. She was crying. He saw the situation she was in. That basically she was just done when it comes, because she couldn't work as a woman. Only job she could probably get would be as somebody's slave or being a prostitute. Unfortunately, he saw compassion and said, "I'm gonna help this woman out." And so, what does he do? He heals her only son. And so he sees I'm gonna give this woman back her life. And so there you go. And it's interesting enough, before we move to my next point, is that even though he did all this, if you look at verse 16, it says that he did this and the people were amazed. They said that great fear fell on them. Not fear like, but great like awe, like, wow, who is this? And they said they began to glorify God. And this is what they said, though. They said, "A great prophet has risen among us." No, a great prophet, not the Messiah, not the Savior of the world, but they said he was a prophet. And though Jesus, to this point, Jesus has not 100% said that he is the Messiah. I don't think he has not said he is the Messiah. John the Baptist said that basically let everybody know when he was baptizing in chapter 2, he was baptizing them, letting them know that, hey, the Messiah is here, and there he is. Yet people are still saying that this Jesus is just a mere prophet, that he's not the one. They didn't believe. And they were okay with that. They were okay with a prophet healing and all this other stuff because it's still at their level. But to say that this man is God, no, they didn't want to say that. They didn't want to say that. And interesting enough, it doesn't say that even the disciples, it didn't say the disciples believed, but it doesn't differentiate or, separate the idea that between the disciples and those who are there. So I'm assuming that even the disciples at this point still believe that he's just a prophet. Possibly. So anyway, there we go. All right. So, but going back to the original point here on this slide, you see the comparison. You see that Jesus does not show any favoritism towards anybody. He's not just going to just men who are rich or just going to just Jewish people who are poor. He's going to everyone. Anyone who has faith, he is going to heal. And so we see the faith of the centurion. We see the faith of the woman. Even though she necessarily didn't say, heal my son, he saw the situation and decided to give this woman her life back. And so Jesus is going to the outcast. He's the outcast amongst the Jews, who Jews don't like centurions. They don't like Romans. And then he's going also to the same people the Jews also outcast as this widowed woman. So Jesus is saying, I'm going to reach out to I'm going to reach out to all outcasts, those who are humbled enough to know who I am and believe in me as their Savior. I'm going to heal.